When Kane said, "All four of you, get in," the story had only begun. Now Briggs comes back for blood. The knock came before sunrise. 3 slow raps against the heavy oak door, measured and deliberate, as though the caller already knew Marcus Kane hadn't slept. Kane sat in the porch chair, rifle laid across his lap, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first streaks of pale light broke the night. Sarah, wrapped in a shawl, startled at the sound. She had barely closed her eyes since slipping into that warm bed upstairs. The children still slept, Tommy tangled in quilts, the twins curled like kittens, but Sarah was on her feet in an instant, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "Don't," Kane said softly, his voice steady, low. "Not till we know who's on the other side." The knock came again, this time sharper. Kane rose, every movement calm, though Sarah noticed the faint tremor in his left hand. Grief and years of solitude had carved something heavy into him, but beneath it lay a steel that hadn't rusted. He eased the door open just a crack. Sheriff Dobbs stood in the gray morning, hat low, mustache wet with dew. Behind him, 2 deputies lingered by their horses, paper rolls clutched in their hands. "Kane," Dobbs drawled, eyes flicking past the rancher into the warm glow of the house. "Got word from Deadwood. Man named Briggs filed claim yesterday. These here papers," he lifted the roll, letting it unfurl a little. "Say them, Henderson children belong to him now. Debt settlement." Sarah felt the floor tilt under her feet. Belong, as if she and her siblings were cattle to be tallied, bought, and sold. Kane opened the door wider, his broad frame blocking Dobbs's view of the staircase where tiny footsteps might come padding at any moment. "That's nonsense," he said, tone even, but edged with iron. Dobbs shrugged. "Law says otherwise. Briggs is riding this way come sundown, bringing men. If the children are here when he arrives, I can't stop him." Sarah's throat tightened. She looked at Kane, the man who'd pulled them from the shadows and promised they'd be safe. For a flicker, doubt crossed her face. Could he really stand against the law, against Briggs' money? Kane held Dobbs's stare, then reached out and took the rolled paper. His weathered fingers crushed it slowly until the parchment bent under the pressure. "You tell Briggs," Kane said, voice quiet but deadly certain, "he'll have to walk through me first." Dobbs' eyes narrowed. A silence hung heavy, broken only by a horse's restless snort. Then the sheriff tipped his hat, muttered, "Your funeral, Kane," and turned back toward his men. Sarah's heart pounded. She knew Briggs would come, tonight, and this time there would be no bluff strong enough to turn him away. Kane shut the door with finality, the paper still clenched in his fist. His eyes met Sarah's. "Get the children ready," he said. "We've got till sundown." The paper lay on the table, edges curled from Kane's fist, its words stamped in bold ink that smelled of fresh wax and false justice. Sarah stared at it, lips trembling as she read the line that gutted her most. "All dependents of the late Joseph Henderson, henceforth the property of Edward Briggs until debts are satisfied." Property. As if Mama's grave meant nothing. As if Papa's mistakes had stripped away their humanity. Sarah's hand hovered over the rifle propped against the wall. "Maybe we should run," she whispered, her voice tight, raw. "Head north. Disappear before he gets here. Better than waiting for him to drag us off." Kane shook his head slowly. "You'll never make it. Briggs has riders from Deadwood to Cheyenne. You'd last 2 days, maybe less. And the children." His gaze lifted to the ceiling, where Tommy's soft snores carried faintly through the beams. "They deserve better than hunger and fear every mile you run." Sarah's jaw clenched. She wanted to belide. Him, but the image of Briggs's eyes at the barn, sharp, knowing, clawed at her memory. "Then what do we do? You can't fight the law. Not 5 men, not papers signed in Deadwood." Kane poured coffee into a tin cup, his movements deliberate, as if each word required the weight of ritual. "The law is just ink and signatures. But a man decides what he'll stand for, Sarah. That's a weight heavier than paper." Her breath hitched. His certainty steadied her in ways she couldn't name, yet the doubt gnawed still. She wasn't a child. She knew guns fired quicker than promises. Footsteps padded down the stairs. Tommy appeared in the doorway, hair rumpled, rubbing his eyes. "Sarah?" His small voice was steady, too steady. "Are they coming back?" Sarah swallowed, crouching to his level. "Yes, but—" Kane's voice cut in, firm but not unkind. "Yes, boy, they're coming. And when they do, you're not to be afraid. You'll stay with Mrs. Chen. Keep your sisters quiet. Let me worry about Briggs. Tommy's eyes shifted from Sarah to Kane. He nodded, though his lip quivered. If they take Sarah, I'll fight. The boy's words landed like an oath, heavy and heartbreaking. Kane's jaw flexed. He crouched low, eye to eye with the child. No, son. You'll live. That's your fight. The boy hesitated, then nodded again, reluctantly. Sarah pulled him close, her heart torn between pride and fear. Outside, a rider galloped past on the ridge, a shadow carrying word faster than wind. By sundown, Briggs would know the children were here. By sundown, the ranch would no longer be a sanctuary, but a battleground. Sarah's eyes found Kane's across the boy's head. Her choice was laid bare. Trust the man who had already risked everything, or take her siblings and vanish into the wild, hunted until they were caught. Before she could answer, Mrs. Chen burst in from the yard, skirts hitched, breath sharp. "Riders," she hissed. "3 of Briggs's men. They're already watching from the hills." The creak of saddle leather echoed faintly across the hills, a rhythm carried on the wind. Kane stood in the porch, lantern doused, his silhouette framed against the last orange smear of sunset. Sarah hovered just behind him, rifle clutched so tight her knuckles blanched. The children were tucked inside with Mrs. Chen, the shutters drawn, the house breathing with their shallow, nervous whispers. A voice called out from the dark, smooth as river rock. "Evening, Kane. We've come polite this time." Kane didn't move. His hand rested casually on the rail, but Sarah saw the tension in his shoulders. "Polite would have been letting the children bury their dead in peace," he said flatly. The voice chuckled. From the shadows, 3 riders shifted, their outlines marked only by the faint glint of steel. "Mr. Briggs ain't a patient man. He wants what's his. Paper says those brats are. You know how this ends. Don't make it ugly." Sarah's breath caught. Every instinct screamed to raise the rifle, but Kane's hand lifted slightly, a silent command. "Not yet." "Funny thing about paper," Kane said, his tone dry as sand. "Burns easy. So do men who try to use it to own children." That silence after, it was heavy, broken only by the distant call of a coyote. Then came the scrape of a boot in stirrup. One rider urged his horse closer, testing. Sarah's heart hammered. She whispered, "They'll storm the house." Kane didn't glance at her, his eyes fixed ahead. "That's what they want you to believe. But men like Briggs' dogs only push when they smell fear." The rider spat into the dirt. "Last warning, Kane. Tomorrow Briggs comes himself. If those kids ain't ready, you'll both hang for stealing his property." Kane finally stepped forward, down onto the yard. Moonlight etched the scar along his jaw as he squared his shoulders. "Then tell Briggs I'll be waiting. And tell him this." His voice dropped, steady as a drawn gun. "Circle K is no place for thieves." The riders lingered, restless, then led their horses sharply. Dust rose in their wake, the sound of hooves pounding into the night, but Sarah's relief was short-lived. Because on the horizon, faint but undeniable, another glow flickered. Campfires, not 3 men, more, a gathering storm. Kane watched, face unreadable. They're making camp out there. Tomorrow they'll come in daylight. Not just riders, lawmen too. Briggs means to make a show of it. Sarah gripped the rifle harder, her breath trembling. "Then what do we do?" Kane looked at her finally, eyes shadowed but fierce. "We choose whether to fight as a family or scatter as strangers." Inside, a child's cry broke the fragile stillness. The house was quieter than a graveyard, yet the air felt thick with the weight of what waited beyond the hills. Sarah sat at the kitchen table, the rifle resting across her knees, while Kane leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, eyes fixed on something unseen. The glow of the hearth softened the edges of the room, but it couldn't warm the dread sitting between them. Tommy patted down the stairs, blanket clutched around his shoulders. His little face was pale, but his eyes sharp. "I can't sleep," he whispered. Sarah reached for him, pulling him close. "Go back up, Tommy. You need your rest." The boy shook his head stubbornly. "Not if you're sitting here alone." Kane's lips tugged slightly. Not quite a smile, more a recognition of courage. He pushed himself away from the doorframe and crouched by the hearth. From his coat pocket, he pulled something wrapped in oilcloth. Slowly, reverently, he unwrapped it, a silver locket, tarnished with time. He held it out toward Tommy, but his eyes lingered on Sarah. "This belonged to my sister. She didn't make it through the winter of '61. She was about your age, boy. Braver than most men I ever rode with. Tommy hesitated, then took the locket with both hands. His fingers brushed over the tiny engraving of a flower. What happened to her? Kane's voice was low, steady. She was taken by men who thought she was nothing but a way to pay debts, just like Brig. GS thinks of you. I couldn't stop it then, but I'll be damned if I let it happen again. The room fell silent. Sarah swallowed hard, the weight of his confession sinking deep. For the first time, she saw the scar not just on his jaw, but in the way his eyes avoided hers when the memory pressed too close. She reached across the table, her hand brushing his, as if by accident. He didn't pull away. For a moment, there was no rifle, no campfires on the horizon, no paper signed in deadwood, just the fragile bond of two people who had lost too much and found themselves standing on the edge of another loss. Tommy climbed onto Sarah's lap, clutching the locket, his eyelids heavy. "If we fight," he murmured sleepily, "we fight together." Kane's gaze met Sarah's then, and in the dim firelight, a quiet understanding passed between them. Whatever dawn brought, they would face it as one. But outside, the campfires burned brighter, closer now, their smoke curling into the sky, a reminder that morning would demand blood or surrender. Dawn broke slow and heavy, the kind that painted the prairie in pale gold, but carried no warmth. Smoke from Briggs's camp hung low, drifting toward Circle K like a warning. The children huddled upstairs, Mrs. Chen whispering prayers in Cantonese, while Sarah and Kane stood side by side on the porch, rifles in hand. Hoofbeats thundered before the sun cleared the ridge. Briggs rode in front, draped in a black coat, flanked by 6 riders and a pair of men wearing tin stars that caught the morning light. Lawmen, bought and paid for. Behind them trailed a wagon, its bars glinting like a mobile jail. Briggs's grin was wide, hungry. "Kane," he called, voice booming, "I've come for what's mine. You hand over those children, we'll spare your hide. Refuse and I'll see you hang beside their sister." Kane stepped forward, steady, scar glinting. "You mistake me, Brig. GS. These children aren't yours. And I'll see the devil take me before you touch one hair on their heads." A murmur rippled through the riders. One of the lawmen raised his hand, but Kane's rifle cracked first, the bullet shattering the tin star from the man's chest without drawing blood. A warning shot, precise as judgment. The standoff erupted. Shouts, hooves, rifles raised. Sarah braced the rifle against her shoulder, breath steady. She squeezed the trigger, the shot tearing the hat clean off Briggs's head. Dust and fury filled the air. For a heartbeat, it seemed blood would drown the yard, but something shifted. The younger rider, barely more than a boy, lowered his gun. His eyes darted to Briggs, then to Kane, then to the children peeking from the shuttered window. The weight of what they were fighting for, flesh and blood, not property, cracked through the false law like sunlight through storm clouds. One by one, the others faltered. Guns dipped, horses shifted. Even the lawman who'd lost his star spat into the dirt and turned his mount. Briggs alone remained, face red, spittle flying. "Cowards, all of you!" he roared. "These brats are mine by law." Kane leveled his rifle square at Briggs's chest. "No, Edward. By law or by God, you've lost." Briggs's hand twitched for his holster, but Sarah was faster. Her shot rang true, splintering the revolver clean from his grip. The iron clattered into the dust. Silence fell, absolute. Kane stepped closer, his shadow falling over Briggs. "Ride away, and never set foot on Circle K again, or you'll leave in that wagon you brought." Briggs's eyes darted, wild, but no one moved to back him. His power bled out into the dirt with the morning light. Finally, with a guttural curse, he yanked his reins and turned his horse, galloping toward the horizon, smaller with every stride. The children spilled from the house, tears and laughter tangled together. Tommy still clutched the silver locket as he ran to Kane, wrapping his arms around the rancher's waist. Sarah followed, breathless, eyes wet but unbroken. Kane looked at the Mom, all 4, huddled in the yard. And for the first time in years, the hard line of his jaw softened. He bent down, pulling them close, his voice low but sure. "You're safe now. As long as I breathe, you're home." Weeks later, the Circle K rang with the sound of children's laughter. The barn smelled of hay, not fear. The papers Briggs had waved burned in the hearth, ash scattered to the winds. Sarah worked the land beside Kane, her siblings chasing chickens through the yard. Life was still hard, but it was theirs, and no man could take it. Years later, Sarah would remember that dawn, the smoke, the guns, the moment Cain stood unflinching against the dark. She would remember it not as the morning of a fight, but the morning her family truly began again. And the last frame lingered, the Circle K porch at sunset, Cain's hat resting on the rail, children's shadows stretching long across the dust, and Sarah's quiet smile beneath the endless western sky. Stories like this aren't just told, they're felt. If you felt it too, subscribe and stay with us.